All right, welcome back, and let's continue our exploration of different techniques to animate something that might be part of a title or text of some sort. And just wanted to point out we do have a collection of techniques and videos, tutorials here. There are many of them also in our playlist on the PD Howler channel on YouTube, and I've just added this most recent one here, part one of a mini-series that will be on animated titles. All right, so, well, pardon me. I'm going to go and switch over to Howler. And over here, I'm going to focus again on animation and text in particular that needs to be animated. And so in this part, part two, what I'd like to do is have an animation where each letter is animated. And so let's start with something, let's say, oh, Pluto, why not, since we've been talking about Pluto for so long in the last couple of weeks with New Horizons. Let's give it an interesting looking font. Why not? Let's use this one. Not much difference going bold, but maybe we can make it a little bit bigger. There you go. All right. So one thing we'll also do is we'll center it. There it is. Then we'll grab the lower right corner and bring it around this somewhere into the middle roughly. And maybe not. Maybe it needs to be somewhere else. Whatever. So let's have it there, and we'll go and render that. Apply text, and perhaps we'll store this image. We might need it again. And now let's do an animation of each of the letters individually. Eventually what I want to do is have it kind of explode, have each letter go away, kind of a flocking of the letters, or the reverse of that. But maybe an easier way is to actually first animate it from this final position back and move them out, and then just reverse the animation. So we're not going to have them fly from outside to their final position. At first we'll have them from here fly outside, outward, away, and then the final animation will just have to be reversed, right? So let's go and do the following. We'll create an animation. Let's keep it simple here, just 30 frames is good for testing. We'll clear it. We'll make sure there's nothing in there, so let's clear frames, and I will clear all frames. And we will put this initial frame, this initial animation, either in a separate layer or in the swap image. We could probably put it in a layer. Let's go put one layer here, and then put this image, click on the stored copy, and then simply have this at lesser intensity, and also have it perhaps not be the one that's animated. So click on the layer down below here, and the animation will go through that same image. In other words, we can go through the animations here at the top. There's one animation track, and we can see the other layer continuously. And so we can have this as a reference point as to where they should animate from or to. We might want to have one of them, for instance, the letter O might be orbiting around the letter U, and it's good to see where these are. There are other visual guides, right? We're using this basically as a guide, as a visual guide to indicate where we should have the others animate. And there are other things you can do in the sidebar to help you with such guides. There is a grid, and in the grid, you can see, well, first of all, you can enable the rulers. These are on the outside, left and top. That can be useful also for positioning references. There's a visible grid as well, and that one is subject to the dimensions you set here. So that can also be useful in helping you position certain elements relative to this grid. And then there's also artist guides. And those can be very useful for quickly having some reference diagonals as well, and intersecting points. That is something that you may want to use as well. So I'm going to go, however, focus on just the image that's here. And let's go back into the text tool, and we still have it in the same position. This time I'm going to erase everything except for the letter P. And since it is meant to be centered, which I did last time, it's going to be centered right here. I don't need to make this bounding box smaller. I can keep it there. What I do want to do is now turn this into a brush, right? So click this into a brush. Now you have it as a brush, and you can go and manually place it where you want. So you can also animate it. Now there's two different techniques that we will see in this part of the tutorial. We will see animating it manually, meaning we're doing a brush stroke and we need to do something so that it actually animates this across the entire frame sequence. Now the technique will mean basically doing something like this, a brush stroke with the left button, undo that, and then using the Alt key. If you press the Alt key, nothing different is happening yet. And the reason is that we do need the brush itself to be an animated brush as well. Okay, let me explain. Let me undo this. Let's go and store the brush that we currently have with this one letter, the letter P, and store and manage a copy. So you see the letter P here, and it's a little bit distorted because it's squeezed. It doesn't have the same aspect ratio as what we originally grabbed. That's okay. It still has it in its entirety in the right format. And what we'll do is we'll click on the Show Film Strip. And you see there's only one image in there. This is the animated brush. That's really not animated yet. So what we need to do is add another one. And ideally, the same identical one in this case. We don't want it to change. Now we could have it be a smaller one or a slightly different angle. And there's actually a whole universe of transforms you can apply to an animated brush. If you start from a series of images and you go to the brush menu, under animated brush, you can go to a timeline editor, there, animated brush timeline, but you need to first have an animated brush. So you need to load a bunch of images into this. And what we will do is simply take the original without any transform, same size, same color, same orientation. That current brush will just add it to itself, add a frame, boom, and now we have two of those. That's enough to call it an animated brush. Now, if you want it to be sophisticated and add some subtle changes from one to the other and not just work with two images, you could just click this a few more times and end up with 10 images, 20 or whatnot. But what we'll do here in this case, we'll just keep it as an animated brush of at least 2 frames and minimize this. So we have a little placeholder here for the brush. And what we can do now is do the same brush stroke that we did earlier, right? But hold the Alt key down. And when you do that, and we have an animated brush, then the entire brush sequence is going to go into the entire frame sequence. Well, at least as long as you paint, right? We may end up painting only for a very short brush stroke, and maybe only about 10 frames are going to be plastered with it. So let's see what that looks like. Let's do it. Press and hold the Alt key and place this here and then drag away. And you notice you don't see that trail anymore here. But when you look at the frames up here, it did indeed place this into the animation sequence. Now, there may be frames that it skips, or it may have 2 images in a frame. Well, probably not. But it is not as clean as 1-for-1 necessarily. It depends on a number of parameters and how fast you move and how big the brush is or how much transform time it's wasting on it or rendering time. So there are some times where this is going to be a little bit flickery and not exactly the very clean, perfect animation. But it's good enough if you want it to look like it's exploding. It's supposed to be messy, right? So let's do another one. Let's go to the text tool and this time put the letter L in there and turn that into a brush, make brush, and we'll have it from here. And make sure we go back to the beginning, first frame, and place it here, Alt key down, boom, something like this, all right? And so now up, this one is not animated yet because it's not an animated brush. So let's go do an undo. And well, let's do that again. Undo, there it is. Okay. And so again, we need to store the brush, store and manage it, add the frame. We don't need to see the film strip. It helps if we see it just for beginners, but we know when we click add, it adds 1 frame. When we delete frame, it will ask us, do you want to delete that? Now you cannot go beyond this point. We need to have at least 1 frame, but this is not an animated frame. So let's go add 1 frame and then minimize this. All right. So we have the letter P for Pluto. We have L for Ludo. Let's go place it right here. And this time actually zoom. No, let's not zoom out. Let's keep it just like this. Press the Alt key and do a little circle. And now we see that we went a little bit beyond. We went beyond the 30 frames, and so the letter L appears down here while it reappears down here as well. All right, so this is the one up here is from first the frame there, frame 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And then as we reach the circle's end and we continue at about frame 28 or so, we're down here in the lower left, we continued to paint, and it recycles to the beginning of the frame sequence. So keep that in mind. If you're painting too long, you're going to paint over itself, and it's going to start looping. And actually, sometimes that's really great. That's really a feature you want to explore as well. But let's see. What we may want to do is actually perhaps go to that first frame and find the letter L. There it is, and then erase it. Right? Use the right button to erase it. Go to the next frame. There it is. Erase it with the right button. Just paint over it, and so on. So these we can do without, and we don't need them in our. Let's go close this. We don't need them here. At the beginning of the animation, we need the letter L over here. All right, I think that does it. Oh, there's one more little one. All right, good. So now we have an animation like this. Right, and so let's do another one. Let's do the letter U. This one, so again, the T for text tool. Let's use the letter U, turn it into a brush, and this time we don't want it to start right at the beginning. Right, the P and the L started to move at the same time. Right, this time maybe we want to wait till about here. All right, and then have it go to the left. So start, hold the Alt key. Again, we need to first turn this into store the brush and add a frame. Now we have an animated one. And so here's Plu. And we're going to go around here, hold the Alt key, and yum. All right, and then so once again, we don't have U moving here now, but now it starts to move. Boom. All right, now let's do the letter T, and this one will do start perhaps a few frames after the T. So let's go. Okay, text tool, letter T, and make that a brush, and store, manage a copy, add a frame, minimize. Now we're getting fast to this plot. Okay, and Alt key down, and whoop, up we go. And then one last one, we'll do the letter O. So T, O, and turn that into a brush. And now for this one, we'll do a different technique. Right? We've seen in other tutorials we can use the brush keyframer. This one we do not need an animated brush for, although we could. And in fact, we'll do that. We'll explore some animated brush techniques with the keyframer or with the timeline rather, to make it like a spinning O or something like that. What am I talking about? Let's just do it right now. So I'm going to go and store animated brush copy, and I'm going to use the film strip here, show the film strip, and just do this a few times. So let's go click add frame, add frame, add frame, add frame. So we have a little bit of an animation here. Let's do it about 10 or 20 times, 15, something like that. Doesn't matter exactly how many. But now we have a nice animated sequence. And the letter O is here, but it's not quite finished yet. What we want to do is go to brush, animated brush, timeline, animated brush, timeline. And so with this, what we'll do is we'll do a transform where it's rotating. All right, so we'll do, we'll say from here it's at this orientation. Let's go to the transform filters here. Where are the transforms? There, transform. All right, and we'll go rotate this at just full circle. All right, so we'll go from here, keyframe that, and linear mode, and then go over here for the last frame, and go full rotation, and I wonder if we should perhaps have it a little bit less. 360 divided by how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 15 frames. I suppose this could be about 20 or so degrees. So let's go about 240. So we have one frame that reaches this last angle just before it kind of loops to the final keyframe. That. So now we have an animation that's going to go render that, doing a transform. Now it's actually masked through it here. It's a little bug, but it did the right thing. We can go now and use the destination, that's the transform sequence here, as the new brush, and we can minimize this, and you can see now if I store this brush, store and manage a copy of it, looking at the film strip, you now see that it's doing a transformation on it. And if you paint with it, it's cycling through this animation sequence. Alright, so let's put that to good use, undo that, and we will go to the first. One thing we need to do is make sure we go down to the first brush. So you can click on this and that will reload that brush, because if you click this one or this one, it picks whatever it is that you pick. So let's go pick this one, that will do the transform, and we'll have it go from here. And one clean way to animate it, again, one way we just saw is we can use the Alt key and just paint away, and it will not only go along that path, it will also cycle through the frames and therefore do this rotating, spinning animation. But another way to do that, and I wanted to focus on that as well, is to show the brush keyframer once more. With the brush keyframer, you can see that right now we actually don't have this text here yet, right? And that is because it's in a separate layer. Right, so that brings another little challenge here. How do we get this thing in there? So we may need to actually have Pluto in there, at least on the first frame. Right, so Pluto should be added to the very first frame. And so what I'll do is I'll go to the first frame, which right now, by the way, there's nothing in there. We see this one that's in the layer, in the upper layer. Let's go minimize, turn that off. So here the first frame is actually empty. So what I'll do is I'll actually put this guy in there, make it a little bit less intense with the interactive undo. Right? That's very similar to having a transparency level on the layer. It looks similar, but it's actually a different technique. And so I can go and start from here as I'm painting, as I'm using my animated brush keyframer. Brush keyframer, go here. It starts with that image. The other frames though are void of that full word, and they only contain the animation. But we can use that to say, okay, let's start right over here, right? Something like this, and put the keyframe there, and then we'll need to move it away. Perhaps initially it doesn't move, so we see it spin through the frame sequence that the animated brush contains. There you go. And then perhaps here we'll start going around like this. Perhaps change the scale a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. There you go. And then we want it to kind of come towards us and get bigger, and also fade away, opacity away. There. Keyframe that and make this a linear trans and go. There. So we now have an interesting animation. We have Pluto at the very beginning of the first frame. We might want to get rid of that, or we might now want to actually enforce it. Put this guy on top. There. All right. And the question now is, how do we composite it so Pluto fades away while all these letters also move away? Right? We have a quick animation like this. It would be nice to see Pluto still there for a little while. I mean, one thing we can do is we can take this first frame now and first of all store it. This is a key stage in our development. We want to go store this to disk and have a quick snapshot. We can easily get back to it. Just click it, that will restore it. But one thing we want to do is add a few frames where Pluto is here at the beginning. So let's go and simply click that frame and add. Insert the frame, there will be a copy of it. And you can see if you scroll to it, they're all identical here a couple of times. So we now have not a whole lot of animation in the first couple of frames, and then we eventually see this thing fly away. Let's say we want to add a little bit of transform while we're zooming in, for instance. We're flying into Pluto and then it kind of blows away. Or it might go the other way. So let's go do a timeline transform for that, right? So let's go to the filters 1, 2, 3, down to the transforms. There it is. And simply do a scale in. So this is the position we want as it's starting, or the size we want as it's starting to animate. Or maybe not. Maybe we want to scale the whole thing even more. So initially, we'll have it a little bit bigger, something like this. And then by about here, it's going to go smaller to the regular size, or even below that. But there you're going to have the edge showing. You're going to have to patch that up, which you can do too. But let's go without it. So let's keep it around like that and apply that. All right, so now we have the animation we wanted. How do we keep Pluto staying there a little bit longer? Now we need to perhaps composite 2 Plutos, right? So one thing we could do, let's go do this. Let's undo this most recent timeline transform. Undo. There. What we'll do is we'll create another animation where Pluto is just there and not moving, and then we'll just fade it away, and then we'll combine the 2 together. Right, so what we'll do is something like this. Let's go make sure we have this animation here. Let's go restore this one. That's actually one way to restore it rather than undo. And put this animation has how many frames right now? 30? Oh, it doesn't have that first one extended, so we needed that one actually. Well, that's good. We can start from this one. What we have 30 frames, and we'll just create a new animation from those 30 frames, and the first one will be duplicated. And so we now have Pluto without any transform. Let's now fade it away, gradually fade it away over time. And there's a couple of ways to do that. One way to do that is, right here with the timeline editor. Basically increase or decrease the brightness, or increase the saturation, or what. There's a couple of different techniques here. Value adjustment. You could increase the value here until it the brightness until it fades to white everything, right? So let's go do that. Let's say go from here all the way to the end, full brightness, boom, apply. So now Pluto is fading. There you go. So that's one animation. Let's go store this one to disk. And we now have 2 animations, right? We have this one, which animates the letters. We have this one, which simply fades away. And the trick now is to combine the 2 together, right? So what we'll do is for instance, we'll load this one that's fading away, right? And then we'll check this box here to say designate this one as a swap image, right? And then we'll do a combining. One thing you can see, for instance, here in the previews, if you click this to blend the 2 together, you'll see them both at the same time. Right? Do we do this in multiply mode, in additive mode, in subtract mode, or in less than mode? A couple of different ways to work this. What we'll do is actually a different technique. And actually, no, this is a quick and easy one. Let's do that. So let's say we want to see what it looks like around here. Is this acceptable, or do we need a different style, a different mode? Greater than will give you a different impression here. A different screen is sometimes a good one. Layer mode tracing paper. Ooh, that one's interesting in this case here. I like that style. The letters barely visible. Maybe not visible enough, but we can adjust the contrast after that. So let's use this. Okay, how do we merge these 2 together, frame for frame? Simply right click here, merge with swap in that layer blending mode, and there it is. So now we have this little bit of animation. Let's go store this, store animation to disk. So we have a snapshot. It is on disk. And we can go and do perhaps a little bit of a filter contrast value. Wait, let's go somewhere around here. We want these letters T, U to be a little bit more easily seen. So one thing we could do here is adjust value and perhaps add contrast. There you go. Reduce, now keep the brightness high, Anyway, there's a couple of ways to do that. Apply to all filters. There you go. And at the very end, everything is gone. At the very beginning, everything's like this. Let's click add a few times. Add frame at the beginning. Add frame at the end. 5 times, and now you have an animation that does this. All right, and what else could we do? Instead of contrast adjustment, one that certainly will look really interesting too. Let's store this one here. One that will certainly look interesting too is the lighting style, the stylized lighting tool. Right. With this, you have a little bit of a light source there, and you can have it come from the side. You can have it add some gloss to that. Put the light source farther away or closer down there. You can have the height of that depth extrusion there, smoothness, and multiply something like this. So you could do some really fancy lighting effects here and animate that as well. Let's change the color. Let's add light color. Let's change it to, I don't know, something like this. So, yep, a little bit less on the intensity, a little bit more on, what else? That's too much. That's what we need. A little bit more on this brightness, specular highlight. That's too much. I suppose something like this. Ooh, I like this texture showing here too. Multiply to the there, something like this. Animate that. And so now we have a little fancier animation. And let's watch that. Alright, well, that was a quick intro on one technique to animate letters. And hope you liked it. And look forward to showing you the other technique. This will invoke the curve tool, which we can use to create a path and then have the letters go along that path and either on the current frame or again spread across as an animation. So we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back with the next tutorial, part 3, very soon.